September 16th, 2025, the Gulf of Aden. At 3:30 a.m., the dark surface of the ocean broke into chaos. Engines screamed, wakes split the water, and 30 speedboats surged forward, carrying more than 250 Somali pirates. Armed with RPG-7s, AK-47s, and heavy DSHK machine guns welded crudely to their bows, the flotilla closed in on a single target, the U.S. Navy's fleet oiler, USNS Guadalupe. The Guadalupe, displacing 40,000 tons, carried over 8 million gallons of jet fuel destined for a carrier strike group nearby. To the pirates, it was a floating fortune. But to the U.S. Navy, it was a floating bomb. One rocket-propelled grenade finding the wrong mark could ignite a fireball powerful enough to rival a tactical warhead, shutting down one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Aboard her escort, the guided missile destroyer USS Laboon, radar operators at first dismissed the cluster of returns as fishing boats. Then the tracks fanned out and accelerated, 20-plus knots, all converging on the oiler. Crimson alarms blared across the ship. Captain Michael Harris gave the order no sailor forgets. All hands, battle stations. The pirates came in like an angry swarm. Tracers streaked across the night sky. RPGs arced, detonating against steel plating. One rocket slammed into the oiler's aft superstructure, punching a smoking hole and sparking a fire near the fuel deck. Fire crews battled the flames in minutes, saving the ship from instant catastrophe. But the assault only intensified. AK-47s rattled, PKMS barked, and rockets streamed in at terrifyingly close range. A round smashed through the destroyer's bridge window, showering glass and steel shards across the command deck. 4 sailors were wounded, 1 burned, but none left their stations. The American reply was thunderous. 50 caliber machine guns roared from the Laboon's decks, cutting wooden skiffs into splinters. The cruiser USS Cape St. George, 5 nautical miles to the south, charged into the fight, unleashing 20-millimeter cannon bursts that ripped boats apart. In the first 30 minutes, 9 pirate vessels were obliterated, dozens killed, their bodies and weapons spilling into the surf. Still, the swarm pressed on. Nearly 20 more boats closed in, aiming to ram the oiler and board her decks. The U.S. gunners stood firm. Heavy machine guns clattered, RPGs misfired, and 1 skiff was torn in half by concentrated fire. Another launched a rocket that exploded barely 200 yards off the destroyer's port beam, shaking sailors to the deck but causing no damage. By dawn, the sea was littered with burning wreckage. More than 70 pirates lay dead. Yet the nightmare wasn't over. More than 180 fighters were still afloat, circling in loose formation, regrouping for another wave. Ammunition belts poured round after round into smoking guns. The destroyer's gunners, blackened with soot, fired until their barrels glowed. The crew of the oiler fought to keep pumps steady and fires controlled. From the destroyer's bridge, Captain Harris knew brute force alone would not end this. The swarm was too large, too organized. This wasn't ragtag piracy. This was paramilitary warfare, orchestrated by Somali warlord Khaled Kadar Abdul Rahman, a name already notorious in Pentagon briefings. To crush this threat, America would need more than courage. It would need overwhelming force. At 5:10 a.m., smoke still drifted across the Gulf, but the fight was only beginning. Harris picked up the secure comms line and issued the order. Call Djibouti, call the Apaches, call the SEALs. The Navy wasn't just going to defend the Guadalupe, it was going to hunt the pirates to their very shore. At Camp Lemonnier, Djibouti, the only permanent U.S. military base on the African continent, the alarm sounded before dawn. Secure lines carried Captain Harris's urgent call across the command network. A U.S. Navy tanker and its escorts were under sustained attack, facing the largest pirate swarm in modern history. The response was immediate. 3 CH-47 Chinook helicopters were loaded with 120 Navy SEALs, each man armed to the teeth. Night vision optics, laser-guided rifles, demolition gear, and breaching charges. Alongside them, 3 AH-64E Apache gunships prepped for launch, their 30mm cannons fed with 1,200 rounds each. Hellfire missiles secured beneath stub wings. Overhead MQ-9 Reaper drones were already in the sky, relaying live feeds of the chaos unfolding in the Gulf of Aden. Back at sea, the battle raged. The USS Laboon and US Cape St. George fought to hold the swarm at bay. The oiler USNS Guadalupe still plowed forward, her decks scarred, her crew exhausted but unbroken. Tracer fire continued to slice the dawn. Pirates in ragged clothes screamed war cries as they fired wildly, desperate to close the distance. Every skiff carried dozens of fighters, their gunnels stacked with ammunition crates, their bows rigged with jury-rigged mounts for heavy weapons. At 5:30 a.m., the MQ-9 Reaper relayed a chilling image. Another wave of pirate skiffs launching from Somalia's Bawai coast. Fuel barrels rolled across sand, men with RPGs climbed aboard, engines revved. This was not a raid born of desperation, it was a campaign. Khalid Qadar Abdul Rahman's empire was feeding the sea with bodies and weapons. The Laboon's captain understood time was running out. Ammunition was running low. Gunners had already burned through thousands of rounds and barrels smoked. He gave the order, conserve fire. Aim for engines and gunners, not hulls. 5 minutes until help arrived. At 6:02 a.m., the roar of rotors finally split the horizon. Chinooks thundered low across the surf, flanked by Apaches circling like hawks. Sailors on deck cheered as shadows swept across the smoke-streaked sea. The pirates faltered at the sight, rotor wash whipping their boats, the silhouette of Apaches bristling with firepower. The first Apache fired without hesitation. Its 30mm cannon stitched fire across the water, shattering 3 skiffs in a matter of seconds. Explosions lit the dawn. Pirates screamed and leapt into the sea, their weapons tumbling uselessly into the waves. Another Apache loosed a Hellfire missile at a cluster of boats forming a pincer maneuver on the Guadalupe. The detonation was devastating. 5 boats obliterated in a flash, the shockwave flipping others like toys. Meanwhile, the Chinooks flared above the coastline, ropes unspooled and SEALs fast roped onto the sand near the pirates' launch site. Within minutes, 2 assault squads stormed forward, breaching the first warehouse. What they found confirmed every suspicion. Stacks of Chinese-made rifles, Iranian mortars, crates of RPGs, all bound for pirate use. Evidence of a clandestine supply chain stretching far beyond Somali waters. Back at sea, the battle reached a fever pitch. Pirates still pressed, though their numbers thinned with every passing minute. The destroyers' heavy machine guns cut them down. Apaches strafed with merciless accuracy, and SEALs destroyed launch sites ashore. By 7 a.m., the tide had turned. The swarm was broken, their skiffs burning or fleeing, their firepower silenced by steel and discipline. But Captain Harris knew this was not just about one night, one fight. This was a declaration. Somali piracy had evolved into paramilitary warfare, supported by global arms networks, fueled by ransom and smuggling profits. And now it had been met with America's full answer. The order went out from Washington: secure the seas, dismantle the stronghold. The Navy was no longer fighting defense. It was going on the offensive. At 7:40 a.m., with the pirate skiffs retreating in chaos, the focus shifted from defense to eradication. U.S. Central Command had authorized a full strike against Khalid Qadar Abdul Rahman's coastal fortress, the nerve center behind the largest pirate assault in 2 decades. Intelligence painted a chilling picture. More than 150 armed fighters guarding 15 tons of weapons, 200 RPG launchers, thousands of rifles, mortar rounds, and over 40,000 gallons of fuel. If the pirates regrouped, they could threaten international shipping again within days. That was unacceptable. The strike began with precision naval fire. From 12 nautical miles offshore, USS Laboon's 5-inch gun roared, its shells arcing high before slamming into the shoreline fuel depot. The blast erupted like an earthquake, sending a column of black smoke thousands of feet into the sky. Fireballs engulfed fuel tanks and tore through wooden structures, detonating barrels of diesel stacked along the sand. Secondary explosions rattled the ground, evidence of munitions cooking off inside the compound. Then came the SEALs. Chinooks hovered low, disgorging squads onto the dunes under covering fire from Apaches. Rotor wash churned the sand as the first team surged forward. Rifles raised, night vision optics switched to daylight filters. Their mission: clear warehouses, neutralize fighters, destroy the stockpiles. Within moments, the sound of gunfire cracked across the coast. SEALs breached the first warehouse using C4 charges, blasting doors off their hinges. Inside, they found what analysts had feared: rows of rifles still wrapped in factory grease, Chinese markings on crates, Iranian mortars stacked in piles, evidence of an international arms pipeline fueling piracy. Resistance was fierce. Pirate fighters unleashed RPG volleys from fortified positions. One rocket detonated dangerously close to a SEAL squad, scattering shrapnel and injuring 2 men. Another team came under withering fire from a DSHK mounted on a truck bed, its heavy rounds cutting the air like buzzsaws. The response was swift. An Apache swooped in, loosing a hellfire that turned the vehicle into a fireball. Survivors fled into the tree line, pursued by suppressive fire from SEAL rifles. Meanwhile, the second warehouse revealed a grim discovery: 6 hostages chained inside, including 2 American merchant sailors kidnapped months earlier. Their rescue electrified the team. Within minutes, the captives were freed, rushed to the extraction zone under the protection of armed escorts. By 8:20 a.m., the compound was collapsing under the weight of firepower. SEAL demolition teams placed charges across weapons caches. Apaches strafed escape boats lined along the shore, each burst of 30mm fire shredding skiffs and igniting fuel drums. Off the coast, USS Cape St. George added its own thunder, firing bursts of 20mm cannon at pirate positions attempting to regroup. Every strike further dismantled the empire Qadar had built from ransom, smuggling, and blood. The climax came at 8:45. With charges primed, the SEALs pulled back toward extraction. Over the commnet, the demolition leader's calm voice delivered the countdown. 5 seconds later, a series of synchronized detonations ripped through the stronghold. Warehouses folded inward. Ammunition cooked off in chain reactions, each explosion louder than the last. Flames engulfed the compound, consuming decades of stockpiled weapons. From offshore, sailors aboard Laboon and Guadalupe watched the coastline light up in fireballs, the rising plumes visible for miles. The cost to the pirates was devastating. More than 90 were confirmed killed in the assault. Dozens more wounded or captured. 60 prisoners, including lieutenants of Qadar's network, were shackled and flown offshore for interrogation. Every warehouse, every cache, every skiff had been obliterated. The stronghold was no more. But victory came at a price. 6 American sailors and 2 SEALs were injured, some gravely. Smoke curled from bandaged wounds as medics worked tirelessly aboard extraction helicopters. Yet even in pain, the rescued hostages clasped their rescuers' hands, whispering thanks through tears. As the Chinooks lifted from the coast and the last Apaches broke orbit, the Gulf of Aden fell silent. Below, the once feared fortress of Khalid Qadar Abdul Rahman burned to ash. The empire of piracy he had built was gone in under 60 minutes of American fury. The message to the world was unmistakable. The United States Navy was not just defending ships, it was dismantling piracy at its roots. And while the seas rolled quiet again, every sailor knew the echoes of this strike would ripple far beyond Somalia. By late afternoon on September 16th, 2025, the Gulf of Aden was eerily calm. Oil slicks shimmered across the water, mingled with drifting wreckage and the charred remains of pirate skiffs. The battle that had begun with 250 Somali raiders surging at a lone tanker ended with their empire reduced to ash. More than 180 pirates were killed, 70 captured or wounded, and a dozen warehouses obliterated along the Bow coastline. For the United States, it was a narrow but decisive victory, bought with courage, firepower, and the iron will of its sailors. Aboard the USS Laboon and USNS Guadalupe, sailors worked into the night, patching steel, tending to the wounded, and honoring the fallen. 4 American lives were lost, their names already etched into Navy history as proof that even routine missions can ignite into war. For the SEAL teams, the liberation of 6 hostages brought a moment of pride amid the smoke, a reminder of why they fought. But in Washington and beyond, the battle carried a sobering message. Piracy in 2025 was no longer ragtag opportunism. This was organized, well-armed, state-backed proxy warfare. Khalid Qadar's empire had thrived on foreign weapons and black market support. proof that instability on distant shores could ripple into global trade and security. The strike dismantled one network, but it also revealed the shifting face of maritime conflict. Pirates wielding RPGs and heavy machine guns were one thing, but their alliances, their funding streams, and their willingness to launch mass assaults spoke to a far greater threat. For the Pentagon, the lesson was clear. Sea lanes are battlegrounds, and every tanker, every carrier, every destroyer is a frontline asset. As night fell, the sailors of the Guadalupe stood at the rails, watching the horizon glow faintly from the burning coast. They had survived the largest pirate assault in modern memory. Yet everyone knew the real battle was larger than Somalia. The message to adversaries worldwide was unmistakable. Strike at America's lifelines, and the response will be swift, overwhelming, and final.